All right, so yeah, we've heard two conversations from Vitalik and Gavin themselves. It's an incredible honor to have them here in the Singapore meetup today. They are definitely stalwarts of the technology as well as Ethereum back in the day since 2014. So just going further into this quick fireside panel, I'll just like to address it from a community perspective and to take the opportunity that you guys are here, sort of to have that kind of leadership from the top, right? So I believe that this was something that was mentioned over in the Hong Kong meetup that you were at. What do you guys think is the common ground like between Polkadot and Ethereum, and what does each project represent at this stage and day and age of today's ecosystem? There's a lot of topic on Reddit, especially or even online, that's been talking about like how both of you guys potentially could even be a competitive rivalry between you two. I definitely think that the ecosystem today is a very young one, and the sum of two parts is definitely greater than two. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think? Just on a very general first question on of this entire competitive rivalry that we're talking about.
Yeah. I don't really. I mean, obviously, projects with tokens will tend to attract some degree of what's the word? Attention in terms of potential competition, primarily because there are, as economic actors with a single source of capital, you can either place them in one or another, and you really want to place them in the one that's going to go, if you're a purely profit-oriented actor, then you'll want to put it in the one that goes up more. But I think it's almost entirely, the competition for what little it is almost entirely in that regard. So almost like saying, Microsoft and IBM are in competition. It's like, there is some level that if you want a tech stock, you can either buy Microsoft stock or buy IBM stock. But in reality, there is relatively little direct competition in the market because they offer different sets of products and different market segments are targeted. So in terms of the technical aspect, my general feeling is that, Polkadot is very much interested in being a meta protocol, a much lower level of abstraction than Ethereum. Ethereum is really dedicated to smart contract level abstraction, and it's really pushing out with very different goals to Ethereum in terms of upgradability, governance, and this notion of sort of interconnectivity, trying to facilitate interactions that might require much more off-chain, on-chain than sort of cooperation that might otherwise be facilitated through a smart contract.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to generally agree with a lot of that. I mean, I think the two platforms definitely kind of test out some very different technical and economic hypotheses, especially and have big differences in terms of the relationship between the protocol and the applications, like what kinds of expectations applications have toward the protocol. I mean, Ethereum is notably kind of not going up and aiming to go in the direction of more activist governance over the long term, and it's taking this layer 2 route more and more in the future. Also, the way that applications are built on the protocol in terms of things like smart contracts and anyone being able to use and deploy applications quickly versus the kind of thing that makes sense to turn into a parachain. And right now it still just feels very early, like it's still before we have any kind of real serious applications other than basically using cryptocurrency for censorship resistance that are being used at large scale. So I think it's definitely good for everyone to kind of approach the space with a healthy level of uncertainty and open-mindedness about the kinds of ways that things can get built in the future. I think.
Yeah, so Polkadot is going live by the end of the year. Ethereum is moving to 2.0. What are some of the ways or synergies that you envision that could work together hand in hand? Vitalik, if you want to drop a comment on that first.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, first of all, the two protocols are both going with kind of WebAssembly, which is definitely going to, I think, create a lot of possibilities for interoperability. And I think even Ethereum, I know, definitely also takes seriously the idea that you should be able to make a really light client of it to facilitate being verified in other blockchains. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine you're going in the same direction. So it seems like there's a lot of opportunity for applications that are built on top of one system to talk to applications built on top of another system, for tokens that are based on Ethereum to be able to kind of move and jump over to things on top of Polkadot, for similar things for other applications in general.
Just to expand on that point, how would you see enterprise involvement in this synergistic relationship between you guys?
Enterprise involvement. So, I mean, right now, enterprises, well, there is the space of people that are trying to do things on top of private blockchains, and my own opinion, as kind of unpopular as it is with certain kinds of suit-and-tie people, is I think the private blockchain space is going to start feeling much less compelling and interesting once public blockchain technology and scalability starts ramping up and reaches the point where it offers acceptable levels of user experience for lots of things. And I do think that once their security proves itself, there's just a lot of rationale for just sticking things on top of blockchains so that you have audit trails, so that you have verifiability, so you have guarantees that you can't muck around with your user's state in ways that are harmful to them undetectably. In terms of like what specific format they use to build applications, I mean, there is realistically going to be a lot of applications that have some public components and some just centralized server components. And I think like where pragmatic compromises between centralized and decentralized approaches make sense, that's probably the kind of version of compromise that's going to end up making more sense. And you know, we see things like plasma chains, for example, as possible, and in general, committing Merkle roots into chains is one way of doing this. But there may be applications that might just want a data availability layer, or that just want it really does depend on like the specific way they choose to structure themselves, which I think really differ use case by use case.
Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely a Parity. We actually share a lot of code between our Ethereum 2 implementation and our Polkadot implementation. So we have basically like a blockchain toolkit called Substrate that is used to form the basis for our phase 0 Jasper implementation. And I see a continued sort of level of, on the technical, purely implementation side, a continued degree of ability to share resources between the two. In many respects, there are similarities at the protocol level between the two. The means of consensus is not a million miles apart. There are different mechanisms, but they I'd say were in roughly the same family of algorithms. The means of kind of networking with the different shards in Jasper and different parachains in Polkadot, there are many of the same problems that need to be solved, and certainly from Parity's point of view, continuing to develop as one of the teams for Ethereum 2 is an important way of ensuring that the technology in general, particularly with regards to implementation, stays ahead of the curve. So there, I think, can easily be some horizontal gene transfer between the two projects. Yeah, and in terms of like enterprise, I think it's not really clear exactly how what enterprise are going to want. I wouldn't go as far as to say that, you know, to disagree. I think that there's once public chains can manage millions of transactions a second, then it seems a not unreasonable thing that the enterprises will move towards public chains much more than they do now. But I think there's still, I think that's still a while off, and I think in the meantime, the idea of them running their own chains and being having some degree of connectivity to other chains is not unreasonable. I think it's something that is much more easily sold to them because they get this notion of independence, of isolatability, they can over ownership that they don't necessarily get with deploying smart contracts into a public ledger. Now, that might be something that's more psychological than anything else, but nonetheless, I think it's, you know, at the top levels of an enterprise, it's something that is relatively strong feeling.
So let's just go into this scenario, right, where Ethereum as well as like Polkadot both are usable in the near future. What do you envision the community will view you guys as? Yeah, Vitalik, like the difference or even like the use cases.
I guess things that Ethereum kind of cares most about targeting are probably, I mean, one is just people's ability to build kind of these many different small-scale applications that can all kind of talk to each other on top of a very homogeneous layer. One is kind of strongly preserving protocol guarantees, also making a particular set of trade-offs in terms of its economics. So there's definitely it still kind of it's hard to say like exactly what kinds of things like those trade-offs make more sense for, because it's still like I'm not even sure, you know, like what if Facebook launches Facebook Coin or whatever they're doing, like what architecture they'll end up using, or even like whatever the next CryptoKitties or the next ENS or Uniswap or whatever ends up being. So it's and I think in general there's just this kind of common mission of trying to experiment with different technical approaches and just make sure that whatever it is that people wants to build is a way to do it that makes sense for them.
Yeah, I probably agree. I think Ethereum's like, you know, has very particular design goals. Like, you know, process lots of transactions, ensure it's a homogeneous environment, and you know, ensure that the actors within that homogeneous environment can very quickly and easily sort of interoperate with each other. Along with, you know, very strong, clear and stable protocol. And Polkadot's really, I would hope that in the future, you know, I don't know about the community, but like the sort of sensible part of the community, I guess, we'll see it more as like the project that sort of pushed forward the notion of protocol mutability, upgradability, of almost like a living protocol. Like I don't want what is launched at Genesis to last very long. I want it to keep changing, and I want it to keep changing, you know, to keep getting better. So as an example, like we're not going to put in quantum crypto for Genesis because it's something that can be upgraded to later on. There's no real need to to cross bridges before you get to them. That's almost like the mantra that we're entering this with.
I just have one last point just to wrap things up. What do you have in terms of from your own project perspective for the community? Like, what are your last words for this for today? Because it's not so often that we can get you guys together on the same kind of like arena. So I just want to get a commentary from you guys. What do you feel is some of your words for the community? What they should be looking out for in your project in the very near future and stuff?
Yeah, be cool. Don't be dicks.
I totally disagree with that, Gavin.
I mean, when we kind of kicked off Ethereum 5 years ago, it was really, we were kind of a little bit like the underdogs. There was a very big, kind of very vocal Bitcoin community, and at times, whenever they did recognize us, it was usually to say, "Oh, what they're doing is impossible," or "What they're doing is a bad idea," or general projection of negativity. I think it's worth remembering that, what our original goals were, which is to push technology forward. And although different projects tend to have different tokens, and if you have only so much money, then you can only choose buy so many tokens. That's not. It's a shame to reduce all of this to how can I get rich the fastest. Really, what we need to do is think about how can we change the world the fastest. And you will notice within the community, some voices are primarily attempting to project negativity or project sort of maximalism, and other voices are asking the right questions, which is, what are the technical reasons that this project is better or worse, or what is it meant to do? How will it change the world? Why will it change the world? Why is it a good thing? They're perfectly valid questions to ask, and I think the community would do better to focus more on the answers of those questions than any of the other stuff that it tends to like to look at.
I think it's important to remember that compared to the big world, the bulk of which has not been decentralized, and large parts of it are veering very quickly toward even more centralization. We are all, and even Bitcoin, still very much underdogs. And regardless of how much the people in the individual communities think they're cooperating or competing or attacking each other, there is, I think, also these kind of large common interests that the projects are advancing, pretty much regardless of whether they want to or not. So even just technical progress on WebAssembly, technical progress on consensus algorithms, cryptography, quantum proof cryptography, aggregate signatures, formal verification, programming languages. There's just general purpose zero knowledge proofs are a huge sector that would pretty much not even exist if it weren't for the cryptocurrency sector. So these are things that are going to have a big impact on all of us and will end up spilling over in a lot of interesting ways, even outside of the blockchain space.
Yeah, I do personally think as well, right now in the ecosystem, it's still a very young one. There's really no need for too much of this kind of any kind of maximalism or any kind of unnecessary thoughts. We are definitely in a period where it's a very defining era of this whole advancement. And going forward, I do think that the sum of these two parts is definitely going to be greater than two. With that as well, if there's any questions that you guys want to have to post to them as well, you can post it on Reddit or just speak directly to us after the meetup. With that, I don't think I have anything else much. So just thanks to PayPal again once again for this event. Thank you all.